We're joined now by the voice of the LSU Tigers, Chris Blair. CB, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good, man. It's good to see you, man. I mean, you're working on Monday and Lindy Gras, and then you're working on Fat Tuesday. I'm glad somebody, your team, is putting in some work here over there at Guarantee. Good for you.
Hey, there's no days off here on Hanging with Hester, CB. Just
I
no days
like it.
off.
I like it.
Hey, you know something about that as well. Hey, before we get to basketball, you had a chance to call your first baseball game over at the box after you got home from South Carolina on Sunday. I know that had to feel good.
Yeah, it was nice to be there, and good to see the team, actually in a game at the box. And, kind of what everybody's been talking to. I heard Hunt earlier today with Kendall Rogers. I mean, I kind of feel the way Kendall does, which is this team's kind of where I thought they would be at this point of the season, just simply because the pitching is deep. I think they're confident truly in 9 guys. We'll have to see where those guys eventually, finish out as the season goes along. I don't think anything's in stone now as far as the rotation is concerned. But, you got to feel pretty good when you got 9 guys that you feel like can go up there and win you a ball game in whatever role they're in. Plus, we saw some of the young lefties on Sunday's Game 3. They look pretty good in their limited time. And I felt like that it's a lineup that's just going to have to get better just simply because there are guys on this stage for the first time in their career and, taking on, different pitchers each and every time. But I think the lineup's only going to get better, a month from now, 2 months from now, and hopefully, knock on wood, 3 months from now, because goodness knows the talent's there.
I agree with you that it will get better. I think when you look at a lot of people start to panic because of a couple of the major positions don't really have a guy that's taken over yet. And I know it's early in the season, but the shortstop position is one that you hear a lot of fans kind of point at to, hey, we've had such a great tradition of shortstops. Who's going to take over at that spot?
Yeah, I think shortstop is one of those that nobody, as you said, has solidified. And, that's always concerning, and I can understand that. LSU's got a pretty good track record with shortstops. So I'm not saying that the fan base is spoiled, but I'm saying they're used to having anchors there. And now it's kind of in flux as to who will be the everyday shortstop. And some of that has to do with how they handle things in the field, and some of it has to do with who's going to give you any production at the plate in that position. Is third solidified with Mathis? I think we're seeing that Mathis is doing a better job and what we may see him get better at the plate. But I don't know if third base is locked down. Unfortunately, Gavin Dugas takes that tough pitch to the helmet on a fastball high and in. Hopefully he's going to be back obviously sooner than later. We all hope so. But is even second baseman locked down yet? So, there's a lot of question marks there, and we've seen some changes in the outfield here in the first 8 games. And again, I'm not an old-timer LSU fan. I readily admit I've only been around 5 seasons, but none of what we're talking about right now surprises me in the least. Number one, I'm used to LSU, and Coach Paul Maneri saying, hey, guys, I'm going to give you opportunities, but you got to make the most of those opportunities. And if you don't, we're going to give somebody else that shot. So that doesn't surprise me. And again, some of the bats and where they are in the lineup, who knows what this lineup's going to look like in 2 weeks, much less 2 months. So, again, I think the panic button is way, way overblown. No need for that just yet.
It's February and it's baseball season. The panic button always comes out. Just get used to it.
That's the other thing I've learned in 5 years.
What do you think that I know that you're out and about with basketball at some times, but what do you think? What has Doug seen from Landon Marceau, and why was he so good over the weekend? And when you saw him at the end of last year so good, what did it look like?
Yeah, Doug's high on him. And he should be. Just simply because, like you said, the end of the season, we kind of started to see him and saw flashes certainly of what we hope becomes consistent behavior from him. But Doug has raved about him. And again, Doug's he's pretty tough on the pitchers. I don't know if people realize that or not, but he understands these guys were highly touted coming out. And, he holds them to a high standard, and why shouldn't he? Not only did he play and win a title, he played with some pretty good pitchers, and he, knows a lot of pretty good pitchers that were here at LSU. So that fraternity, so to speak, kind of holds that standard high. But he's been impressed with Landon, and I have too. And I had a chance to watch both series, from a distance. But that's kind of what we're hoping. And now it's just a matter of, when he sets the bar. Cole Henry, who also I think we've seen what he can do. I was impressed with A.J. Labus on Sunday. I know his numbers weren't quite what Marceau's were on Saturday, but it was an effective way of pitching And as Doug pointed out, when you get a 10-run lead and they're telling you, hey, throw fastballs, early on after that 10-run lead, I thought he did a pretty good job, had enough movement on his fastball to keep the hitters off balance. But eventually, when they go through the lineup another time or two, they're going to know fastball is coming. They're going to be able to get a couple of pieces off of you. But I thought Labus pitched very well. And, I feel like this is a pitching staff that can take LSU a long way. And it's one of those, again, knock on wood, everybody stays healthy, that LSU hasn't had, especially when you get to SEC tournament time, when you get to regional, super regional, and goodness knows, even with a chance to go to Omaha, you got to be deep and you got to be talented in that pitching staff. And right now, that's what LSU has.
Let's go to the hardwood, Chris. We saw Will Wade get pretty emotional talking about the travel schedule. You're not out there playing 40 minutes, but you're working, and then you've been on those flights back that don't get here until the wee hours of the morning. What do you say about the kind of the situation that the travel schedule has put these young guys in?
Well, it is pretty tough. It's not as if with the game ends, is what I was telling my wife yesterday. I was discussing the fact that Will, I think it finally had wore on him, because this is the third or fourth time this season that it's ended up being like this. And it's really tough when you have the road game and then come back home or go on the road. I mean, that's just tough. I mean, we may not get back. When the game ends, there's a good hour and a half. Then you leave the arena, then you get to the airport, and you flip a coin there. You could either leave in 5 minutes or you may be there 30 or 40 minutes. South Carolina, we got to the airport and we were there an hour before we took off. So, all those minutes add up, and suddenly you get a team back at 1:30 Central Time on Thursday morning. They've got school, student athlete, that's what we call them, and they've got some responsibility to handle that for the day that was missed. For example, leaving today at 2 o'clock. They got some of their academic work done, obviously. They're going to continue to do some work in Gainesville tomorrow with their tutors, but they're missing class. So you have to come back and try to get some rest for your body, try to get to class, keep your academics in order, and then, oh, by the way, turn around on Saturday morning and play at 11 o'clock. So is it a tough schedule? Yes. Does everybody have to do it? Absolutely. I think women's basketball also in the SEC has a really tough schedule the way they set their games up, and they handle it. I think the point that Will was trying to make, and I certainly agree with him, is the reason the scheduling has come about is why? The SEC network. Why? Revenue. So I think he was just pointing out that sometimes when conferences or those in the NCAA say everything and every decision is based on the well-being of the student athletes, I think he was calling bull snot on that, if you will, yesterday in the press conference. And I think because this is the third or fourth time they've gone through this, it makes it tough, and I think he just was venting. Not going to change anything, obviously, but I think he was just pointing that out.
Chris Blair, the voice of the LSU Tigers, joins us here on Hanging with Hester. Chris, one thing we know is when Florida and LSU get together on the hardwood, it's going to be a close battle. It's going to be a game that comes down to the buzzer or an overtime the last couple of times out. We understand there's no love lost between these two teams as well. What are you expecting the environment to be like on Wednesday?
Well, the environment's going to be tough. It's not as tough as Auburn, but it's right up there. And, again, it's a team, seems like all these games coming up here, at least the road games, obviously with Florida, South Carolina over the weekend, and Arkansas. I mean, these are teams that are desperate. I mean, we talk about where LSU is positioning and how they feel. Are they on the bubble? All of this. That's the same talk that's going on in Gainesville. So it's going to be a team that's ready to swing. LSU hopefully will be able to match that. But the atmosphere is going to be tough. But you look back, guys, this stat amazed me. I just finished my spotting charts, and I was looking back at the really last two seasons in regular season meetings. You're talking about a couple of overtimes. You're talking about games that went down to the wire. In the last 160 minutes of regulation between the Gators and Tigers, Florida leads 294 to 293 in scoring. That's how close it has been. 1 point difference in 160 minutes of regulation between these two teams. And I'll be honest with you, I was asked doing an interview in Gainesville earlier today, and they asked me why do I think that is. I think it's because the strengths of these teams, outside of Blackshear, who I thought LSU held in check for most of the game in that first. He got 15, but it wasn't an easy 15. But the rest of the matchups to me look very similar. It's a guard-oriented team. They're very good at driving the basketball. Florida may be a little bit better shooting the three-point ball. In fact, they're one of the tops, actually, in the SEC. They are the top team shooting three-point shots in the SEC currently. But I heard Hunt make a point earlier that John Brady's been saying for a couple of weeks now, LSU shoots the ball pretty well from beyond the arc on the road. They only were 2 of 14 in that first meeting, but they got to the free throw line 31 times against Florida, and they shot a pretty good clip from the field. But I think when you look at these two teams, they are built in a way that means we're going to have close games that go down to the wire. And I don't see it being any different coming up tomorrow night, even though it's going to be played in Gainesville.
All right, I've got one more for you, CB. Charles Manning Jr. has made a difference coming off the bench for LSU. I think when you look at last game's box score, I mean, he has taken minutes from Marlon Taylor. I know that they had a switch up there with the starting lineup, which I actually like because I think Emmett Williams coming off the bench gives you some energy. But Charles Manning has been a guy that has helped this team. He's helped, in the offensive rebound category. He's also helped out in three-point shooting. What has he meant to LSU now that he's healthy?
Well, first of all, he gives you that depth, which they didn't have for over a month. And secondly, surprisingly enough, 3 games into his return, I mean, he's played pretty well offensively, and that to me was the biggest concern. I mean, you wanted to get some depth. You knew he would come in and give some guys some minutes, and the defense, at least on the perimeter and on the wing, wouldn't drop dramatically. But how would he get back to what I thought was he was coming into his own offensively before he hurt his foot against Texas A&M early there in January? But I've been pleasantly surprised because he's made some big buckets, made some big baskets against Kentucky, and had some big plays offensively against the Gamecocks. So it's a different team, and I asked Will Wade about it last night on the show. I mean, it's, not to put too much pressure on a Charles Manning, but they're a different team when he's able to go for them. And that's the difference. And hopefully that's going to continue down the stretch in the final 4 games of this season and beyond.
All right, he is Chris Blair, joins us typically every single Monday, but glad to have him here on a Tuesday. CB, we will catch up next week.
All right, happy Mardi Gras to everybody. I'm headed to the airport, and you guys, hate to say, I'm headed to Gainesville. There's about 10,000 places on earth I'd rather go, but
yes,
that's where we're headed.
Hey, safe travels. As you know, coming from me, take care of business against that team there in Gainesville.
That's right. You set the bar. I like it.
All right, there he is, Chris Blair, the voice of the LSU Tigers.